let's talk about Shoichi. So as I mentioned in the previous guides, in the previous Shoichi video that I made, I mentioned that this was actually going to be a two-parter, that we're actually going to be having this in-depth explanation, and that we're actually going to be having the follow-up video that's going to be coming up in the following days, which is, well, this is the in-depth beginner guide to Shoichi. It's going to cover everything you want to know about the character, and that is the premise of it. And I want to know, before we even get into it, I want to know if you guys enjoy this type of stuff. This is very new for me. Normally my meta videos are kind of like very formulaic. They have a very certain rhythm to them, but every time I see it go more in depth, you guys seem to enjoy that. And I just want to know if this is going to be the video you do guys want to see, because this is going to be very heavily edited. Shout out to Dualis, he's the one editing all of this. He is a god. And I just want to know if there's something you're interested in, that commentary and just having the gameplay in the background, and you guys can, you can see the gameplay if you care to, but mostly it's just for that explanation. And yeah, if you are interested in that, leave a comment down below, sub to the channel if you do enjoy it, leave a like, helps out the algorithm, all that fun YouTube stuff. But yeah, with that being said, let's talk about our boy Shoichi. Now, Shoichi is a very unique character in Eternal Return. He's a melee assassin who kind of plays like a melee assassin, but kind of feels like a Pokemon at times. Because you can't just kind of all in people after level 6. You do need to play things pretty slow. You are very squishy, but you're kind of this flashy combo character, really basing everything off the premise of your passive, those daggers. So let's first talk about his skills. So Shoichi's passive is Phony Deal. This is a two-part passive. The first part of it is going to give you critical strike chance depending on how many abilities you use. So this actually goes up depending on the abilities that you've used, right? So if you've hit an enemy with 1 ability, you have 1 stack of this. You hit them with 5 abilities, this will count up to 5. Now, hitting them with abilities is a very weird way of saying this, because you guys know Shoichi's ultimate that drops 4 daggers. If you jump to the daggers and you hit them with the daggers, those count as abilities, so that increases the critical strike chance. So if you were to build, say, a crit Shoichi, you could very easily be at 100% crit strike by just ultimate and jumping to the daggers and then just whacking your opponent. That is mostly a meme build, but you get the point. That is what that passive is meant to do. But it actually has another part to it where at full stacks, you gain extra attack power, which is, I feel like, something that people kind of miss out on. So when you're at full stacks, you're actually stronger, and Shoichi has very high attack power ratios. You probably saw in the previous video that we did that we actually opted for some attack power items over percent skill, because that is how high the ratios are. So just keep that in mind with this passive. When you have it fully stacked, you're actually going to be a lot stronger, mostly because of the attack power, not really because of the critical strike chance. The critical strike chance is nice, but only for early trades where you have the luxury of sitting in your opponent's face and auto attacking them. Not so much later on into the game, as boy, that will be a death sentence. This is really nice in tandem with your W bottom line, as when you W onto somebody, it actually forces an auto attack out, and getting a free critical strike auto attack for an ability you were going to use on them anyways is just a nice little bit of bonus burst into your full rotation. But I would never really rely on it, since it is random. But yeah, when you do get it, it feels really good. But the main part of this passive Phony Deal is the daggers. So when you pick up a dagger, it flings it towards the nearest enemy, and it deals a ton of damage. So this is why Shoichi is kind of just marketed as the best person to abuse flat amp, because you're going to be picking up an absolute ton of these daggers, and these daggers will apply flat amp on them. So pretty much your entire build just wants flat amp, which is why we stay on amp builds, because a Mount Slicer has a ton of free flat amp built into it. So it just makes it really, really good to just kind of one-shot people, just by, especially early on when people have very low health pools and you have a high amount of flat amp. It's super, super easy to one-shot people. So yeah, that is the whole premise of Shoichi. It's pick up those daggers and just running at people, just melting them, getting the resets off, and just keep flying around everywhere. But with that being said, let's talk about his primary abilities. So Shoichi's Q is going to be Good Faith and Bad Faith. Good Faith is the first part of his Q, which is just a little stab that goes right in front of him. It's not really much to say about this. It does a good amount of damage. It's an okay ability, but the main part of it is when you do hit it, it's going to turn into Bad Faith. Bad Faith is going to actually go on a global cooldown after you hit the first part, and when you do throw it, is actually going to throw at a cone. So it's going to do a cone arc and leave a dagger behind. You could do this for a couple things. The first one, of course, is to hurt your opponent, which is going to be the main purpose of it 90% of the time. And you eventually, and you can use this to, you know, you Q2, you throw out the bad faith, and you W right onto it, and you get the free dagger, right? And you get a good amount of burst. That's going to be for that. But there's two other things you could do with this that people kind of forget. So first of all, you can actually do this to go over walls. So you throw, if you're lined up with a wall, you can throw your second part of your Q over a wall, and you can actually jump to that dagger. So that's kind of like an escape tool you do have. So if you think about like the hospital buildings, you can actually use this to jump over the hospital buildings to escape, say, a Yuki early on into a game if you are padding there for whatever reason. You can use this actually across the river over by ponds. So that's a really cute thing you could do with your W as well. And you can also do use this as a catch-up tool. So if you're very fast with this and say your opponent is just a tad bit farther than you, you can actually Q2, jump to the dagger, it closes that distance, and you could W onto them because you have that reset. So yeah, that is going to be really, really, really useful for that. So his W is bottom line. Bottom line is the bread and butter of Shoichi. This is the ability that just lets you dash to any enemy. You could dash to animals, you could dash to your opponents, and there's something that people tend to forget about this. When you go through something, it deals damage as well. I'm just gonna point this out, because when you dash to an enemy, yes, you go through them because you end up behind them. But the thing that people seem to forget is when you're lining up your daggers. So when you line up a dagger and a dagger is behind somebody, you're dealing more damage than if you were just, you know, hitting a dagger to the left or right of them. So remember that your W is kind of just a skill shot in a sense. It's a very straight line, and if you're able to go through somebody, you're gonna deal a lot more damage as well. People tend to forget about this. This is something that also makes Shoichi really strong in squads, because if you can line up that AoE with your W, you can just obliterate an entire team with relative ease. So just keep that in mind with the W. Now, of course, the main part of bottom line is going to be the fact that it resets itself. Whenever you pick up a dagger, this ability resets. But the mana cost is still there. You're gonna run out of SP really early on, especially if you have no SP drinks with you. So remember to carry some SP drinks with you, even if it's just honey water. You kind of need something to top yourself off, because if you go through full rotation, you're going to burn your mana very, very, very fast. So just keep that in mind moving forward when you spam this character a ton. So Shoichi is going to be risky business. Probably arguably the weakest part of his kit, but it's still good nonetheless. It deals a decent amount of damage when you land it, and it will apply a slow as well, but it also knocks you back just a tad bit. So this creates a few issues. The first issue is that this isn't very good on the chase. When you're having to chase out an opponent, and even if you land this, it's sometimes they still get out of range of your W, and it's just not very good. So it's not very good, but in a main combo, it does still fit, and it does give you a little bit of spacing and time to help you out. And what that combo is, just minus your ultimate, is that you can W onto somebody, you can bottom line onto somebody, then you can Q them immediately, and now of course bad faith is going to start ticking down its global cooldown, and then while that's happening, you can E away. You can just E onto them. That'll create the second dagger to come out, and from there you can just kind of dance around them. This usually leaves you two options. The first option is that you're gonna either ultimate and, you know, try to get a dagger right away. You know, if you ultimate next to a wall, you'll get the dagger, or you're going to end up just walking to your dagger from your E, and then at that point your Q2 is going to be up, and you're just going to Q2 W them again, and you know, you have a whole bunch of things you can do from there, right? Usually at that point you just ultimate, you just end their career, you just end them. But yeah, so that's kind of whole premise of the risky business. It's mostly just a setup tool, it's mostly just a peel tool. On the chase, it's not very good. And of course we have Shoichi's ultimate, Ruthless. This is, well, his strongest ability in the kit is the iconic one. It has two parts to it as well. The first part is actually a small swing of his briefcase around him that deals a good amount of damage, and that people tend to forget about. A lot of things that people forgot about this guy's kit when I have to talk about it every day on my stream, which you should be following if you haven't, twitch.tv/Tomsorcer. Make sure to drop the follow there. But the Ruthless is really, really powerful, and it's going to be the main way you get kills. Generally, I don't fight without my ultimate up, as it's useful for escaping, it's useful for fighting, it's everything that you want in your kit. It's not the best way for escaping, it's definitely no Cathy, but it's something. Okay, so with the ultimate, the way you're going to try and set this up is one of two ways. So you have a main combo where, like we mentioned earlier, you can set up with the Q2, and you could jump to the dagger from the Q2, and if you're in range of your opponent, you can ultimate right away and just spam jump on your daggers. Normally this won't hit every part of your dagger, you only hit all 4, and well, the reality is you're generally gonna hit 2 to 3. And that's kind of just how it goes. The second part is you go ultimate near a wall, and one of the daggers from Ruthless is actually going to drop right on top of you. So giving you a reset on bottom line, and is going to be able to just usually get the rest of your daggers to hit them. So remember, using your ultimate near a wall is going to help an absolute ton, so just keep that in mind. And of course, if you are able to jump to your daggers with bottom line and actually go through your opponent, you're going to be dealing a ton of damage with that as well. But yeah, and then of course we have our final ability, which is our weapon skill, and that is Cloak and Dagger. Cloak and Dagger is actually a perfect ability on Shoichi. Shoichi lacks escapes. He really doesn't have escapes outside of his environment. He needs animals to be around him. Without animals, he is going to die really, really, really easy, and especially early on to the game. And this is why Shoichi is probably, well, aside from his numbers right now, Shoichi is like one of the weakest characters in solos, because it's just kind of hard to escape people early on with a risky routing. But in my opinion, he's one of the most rewarding when you get those combos down right. It just feels so satisfying, which is why even though I complain about him constantly, I just can't stop playing him, because it's just that fun. But yeah, so as we mentioned earlier, bottom line actually is an auto attack. It gives you a free auto attack. So when you dagger skill onto somebody, you use dagger skill and you W onto somebody, you actually get that dagger skill damage right on top of them. You deal a ton of damage. So you can use this to open a combo, and you should. If you're going to all in somebody, Shoichi kind of is an all in character, you definitely should use dagger skill to start off that combo, because you're going to deal 8% of their max HP on the spot. And that is, well, that's no damage to scoff at. You'll eventually know what fights you can pick and choose with this, but generally speaking, when you have dagger skill up and you have your ultimate up and you're mostly full build, you're good to go. You want to fight most people you want to run by. So yeah, and this gives them very little room for counterplay, right? So if you dagger skill, you W onto them, you get the Q right away, and you ultimate, you're going to deal a ton of damage, and from there you get to jump to every single one of your daggers, and you just, well, you end them. Like, there's not much to say. They generally die if you're in the right position. For skill ordering, you're going to want to max out your passive, then your ultimate, your W, your Q, and then finally your E. This is going to allow you to get the most amount of damage out of your kit as fast as possible, and that's going to be the very basic skill ordering. There's really no reason to max out your E. It doesn't do a lot of damage. It's really only there just for the extra dagger, and that's about it. So next, I want to talk about the transitions items that you want on Shoichi. So what do I mean by transitions? I know this could be a foreign term for people who like really are just trying to get in the game and really just want to understand the character. So transition items are items that you want to get after you are full build. So once you have all 6 items in your build, you want to be looking for these items. So if you're running the build that we showed a couple days ago, I'll leave a card up above so you can see exactly what video we're talking about. There is actually a lot of transitions that you can make in this build, and in general, these could go for pretty much any form of AMP style Shoichi, right? These go for any form of ability-based Shoichi builds, as these items are just the best slot items for him. So talking about these, let's first start with the chest piece. Currently run Sunset Armor because it is just that easy to make. This is definitely not the items you want to stick on towards the end of the game. For chest pieces, you could very easily go Cabana if given the opportunity. If this item is found off a corpse, you can pick it up and equip it, but just remember, you will be very squishy if you do not find any HP items. Usually you want to have HP in your arm slot, either being a Shifa Shah Jahan or you want to have an accessory like Schrodinger's box to make up for that HP deficit. So just keep that in mind moving forward, that we are very squishy, we are still melee, and it is very easy to die, especially if we don't have those HP items. Another thing you can do is Mithril Armor. Mithril Armor gives you such high defense, it gives you skill damage reduction, and it gives you mobility, which again for a squishy melee character who has all in is very nice. And as you see, this is made off a leather armor. There's going to be a lot of times when you're running the standard build that you end up in forest and you kill a wolf and you find a mithril and you're like, what do I do with this? Should I wait for a mithril shield? Well, if you're on leather armor, just make the mithril armor. Mithril armor is insane early game. It's so many stats, you can just stat check your opponents because it can't kill you that early on into a match. In the current patch, Ioisu is crazy. So if you do find the components, and you may have noticed in the commentary we put out, we actually built this first because you can build this between temple. If you do find a hammer in alley and then going to hotel, you can build this. It is absolutely crazy. So if you find this off a corpse, or maybe you find components off of a corpse, definitely hold on to it and, you know, try to make it as you're moving along. Also, there's Queen of Hearts. Queen of Hearts having the most cooldown reduction of any item in the game. This is what you're gonna make if you do find an early blood sample, or if you kill Wickline and you get the blood sample from her. You definitely want to make this 37 defense, 25% cooldown reduction, and 3 flat regen is really good. But this is the same problem of mithril armor. We don't have any HP to back it up, so we do definitely want something like a Sword of Shah Jahan, or you want a Schrodinger's box to at least make up for the HP deficits. Now, when it comes to headpieces, we're perfectly fine where we are. There is no transitions. But if for some reason you can't make a Burgonet and you do find, you know, maybe an Imperial Crown, it's perfectly fine to sit on that as well. You know, it's still just a very good amp item. Don't be afraid to sit on that if that ends up being the case. For arms is where a lot of our transitions happen. So we start off with the Dropnir, and while Dropnir is very strong, we definitely want to get out of it as soon as possible. It is the weakest part of our build. So in order, in terms of weakest to strongest, is going to be Dropnir, Burnished Aegis. Burnished Aegis is okay because it is just a lot of tank but no damage behind it. Sheath of Shah Jahan, Mithril Shield, Auto Arms, and Bracelet of Scotty. Now, I do want to talk about auto arms. Generally speaking, if you have a force core, you're not going to want to go auto arms. You're generally going to want to go Boots of Hermes, as that is a much bigger upgrade than auto arms is going to be. But if you're sitting on a bracer and you find it from a bear and beach early on, just make it. There's no reason to hold on to it. It's still really strong, and it's going to make you obscenely tanky and make you deal a ton of damage early on into a game. So just keep that in mind when you do find a force core. It is always going to be situational, but generally speaking, we are gonna want the Hermes boots. That is gonna be the best shoes you can have at the moment. Just super tank boots. In terms of amp users right now, boots aren't very strong, so you really only have the straight jacket sneakers, which we're kind of forced to make, and we can make it within our route. And we have the glacial shoes. Glacial shoes are pretty nice. It is 15 flat amp, and as we mentioned earlier, flat amp is a premier stat for Shoichi. It's just a tad bit more than straight jackets, but it's still really good, and it gives us a lot more out of combat movement speed. But when we're in combat, we are slowed a tad bit more than we would be on straight jackets. But if we're in a fight, we're probably not getting out of it anyways. We either have to kill them, or we're just gonna die. But yeah, Hermes is going to be the best boots you can make at the moment. So if you do find a force core, or if you find a meteorite, try to make those boots of Hermes as soon as possible. It's going to make you very tanky and obscenely hard to deal with. For accessories, so we do make the Uchiwa in our routes. I mean, you might notice Korean Shoichis actually, while making the Uchiwa, make a white crane fan as well, because between forest, as you know, there's feathers and fans in forest. All we would need is a nail. So if we end up going from school to Avenue, we find a nail in one of a couple boxes, we can actually get one crane fan, or we can sit on the gilded quill fan if we do miss out on, say, a cloth from Temple, because we do need 2 cloths to make our build overall. In the main build, we can actually build just a White Crane Fan instead. And generally speaking, White Crane Fan is actually better. While Uchiwa does give us more flat amp by just a tad bit more, White Crane Fan gives us healing reduction. Nowhere else in our build do we have healing reduction to deal with our opponents that sustain a ton. So this is going to be an item that helps immensely against that. And of course, movement speed is another just premier stat on Shoichis. Again, squishy melee, we really don't have a lot of agency. We want to be able to try and run away from our opponents as much as possible, especially in fights that we don't want to pick early on. We don't really transition into a Schrodinger's box, but if we do find one off a body, or we find a poison off of a wolf, we will hold on to it and make it to try and seep into those transitions that we mentioned earlier. Other notable items here are things like the Revenge of Gojin. Again, we want flat amp. This gives us percent amp, so it's not as good as the alternative choices. But yeah, that's going to be everything for itemization. So, I just want to give a quick touch about the build, since we are going to talk about all of the possible transitions you can do on Shoichi in general. I do want to talk about the very basic meta build that is on Shoichi right now. This is going to be the simple 3-zoner. I know it says 5, but reality is you can make most of your builds in 3 zones. And one thing that we can do is get most of our items in alley, and I'm going to talk about that. So this is going to be the temple, school, forest, and then really uptown, beach, whatever you miss build. So what I mean by whatever you miss is that one thing we can do is we're going to dip into alley. We're from between temple into the hyperloop. There are 3 boxes in alley that you can go check before you leave. These 3 boxes are going to contain, well, a ton of things that we can use. Lighters that we are very heavily contested in school. We can find them here. We can find hammers. We can find bracelet. We can find a chain. And really, the only thing we're looking between uptown and beach is, well, the chain, bracelet, and hammer. Assuming we find the lighters in school, we should, if we find these 3 things, or even 2 out of these 3 things, we can skip one of these zones entirely and just speed up our builds, well, an insane amount. So that's really, really, really important to remember. But yeah, that's going to be kind of just the basic build. This is one of the Shoichi's strongest points, is that he can finish his builds at a very, very fast rate, faster than most other characters can. It's just, and it made him pretty impressive for a while. He's like the forest killer, is kind of what he's nicknamed as, even though that title kind of goes to Hedjin right now, not to our boy Shoichi. But he is still... he's still incredibly fast at what he does, and you can take a fight very, very early and try to snowball off of that. That is your entire game plan. You really want to snowball off of those kills as much as humanly possible. Now I do want to point out, if you're running this build in teams, that one thing that's going to happen that you can do, and which you should do, is have your teammates bring you components of your build to you, so you can kind of like skip out on the riskier parts. The primary parts of this build, of course, are going to be things like gemstones, are going to be things like lighters and paper. So if you have a teammate starting in one of those zones with those items, make sure they can pick it up for you. That's going to help you out an absolute ton. But aside from that, it's going to route pretty much the same, since it's actually just that fast. This is a build I run in teams all the time, and I kind of just don't even have my teammates pick me up things, since it's pretty fast. Yeah, like I could just do it before they're even halfway done with their builds, and I'm like, yeah, I'm done, guys, and let's just go fight things. So yeah, that's going to be the very basic meta build as of the current patch. Again, this can be outdated very easily, so just reminding you guys. That's going to be all for me, guys. I really hope you guys enjoyed this new type of video. I hope you guys enjoyed the new formats. You know, again, shout out to Alice, he's the one editing all of this. This is something I want to try more. I don't, you know, and I'm going to go through every single character in the game. I want to try this for every single character. I want to have a very consistent flow of beginner guides. I'm going to make general guides starting very soon as well. I'm going to try the first one out sometime this week if possible. But this is going to be the type of thing where I want to see what you guys think. This is the format that can be improved. This is the first one of many. So I want to know what I missed. You know, in this video, we covered his abilities. We covered where we thought he was in the game. We showed off tips. We tried a very heavy show and tell style. And, you know, we covered like the current #1 build on him. We covered transitions. And I'm just curious to see what you guys think was missing, or you felt like should have been added to this video. But yeah, that's going to be all for me today, guys. If you enjoyed the video, as always, please sub to the channel down below. Leave a like down below. And you know what? Leave a comment on what character you want to see next. As well, again, we're redoing all the guides. We're making them as beginner friendly as possible. And... gonna be it for me, guys. Love y'all. I'll see y'all.